I stared at my phone, frozen. The email from my younger brother, Derek, said it all in one smug line. Sold your old warehouse for $250,000. Family needed cash fast. No apology, no question, just a declaration, like he had every right to touch something that wasn't his. That old warehouse he bragged about was worth more than $9 million. It wasn't some dusty shell waiting to collapse. It was one of the most profitable properties in downtown Denver, pulling in over $100,000 every single month. And the worst part, my entire family thought I wouldn't even notice. To them, I was still the quiet librarian with a 10-year-old Civic and nothing to show for my life. They had no idea what was coming. Growing up as the middle child in the Hudson family meant learning to live in the shadows. My parents adored my younger brother, Derek, bragging about his internships at law firms before he even passed the bar. They adored my older sister, Isabel, posting every glamorous wedding photo, every vacation snapshot, and every cocktail party invitation she sent them. And me, I was the quiet one, always tucked away, the faded memory at the edge of family pictures. By the time I hit 30, my life seemed painfully ordinary from the outside. I worked as a librarian at a public branch in Denver, making just under $45,000 a year. My daily uniform was cardigans and flat shoes, the kind nobody photographs for social media. I lived in a modest one-bedroom near Colfax Avenue, in a building with peeling paint and creaky elevators. My car was a 2009 Honda Civic, its bumper dented from a parking lot accident I never bothered to fix. To my parents, these things weren't just neutral details. They were proof that I was the least accomplished Hudson. Every family gathering reinforced that ranking. At Thanksgiving, Mom would beam, "Derek just won another case. You should have seen the judge compliment him." Then she'd turn to Isabel, praising her designer outfit or the Porsche her husband had just leased. When her eyes finally landed on me, her words always felt like an afterthought. "Well, Clara, at least books never go out of style." The room would laugh lightly, not malicious but dismissive, and the sting was the same. But what nobody realized was that I had been living a double life. By day, I shelved books, organized story hours, and helped teenagers with their research papers. But by night and on weekends, I was poring over zoning maps, mortgage statements, and contractor bids. 4 years earlier, after saving obsessively and taking out a small personal loan, I bought my first property, a battered duplex in a neighborhood nobody cared about. My father rolled his eyes, muttering, "That's a money pit, you'll regret it." Isabel laughed, "You'll spend more on plumbers than you'll ever earn in rent." They mocked me at the dinner table, saying I should have just invested in a decent wardrobe instead. But I proved them wrong. Within 18 months, after renovations and careful tenant selection, I doubled my investment. That first duplex opened the door to another property, then another. I learned the language of construction crews, the rhythm of bank transfers, the fine print of lease agreements. While my family raised glasses at country clubs, I was walking through dusty hallways with blueprints rolled under my arm. While they bragged about vacations to Cancun, I was learning how to negotiate contracts with landlords twice my age. By the time I turned 30, the invisible librarian had quietly become the owner of 21 properties scattered across Denver. None of my family knew. They never asked where my weekends disappeared or why I never borrowed money. And I never told them, because the truth didn't matter to people who already decided I was nothing. I stayed silent on purpose, because sometimes being underestimated is the sharpest weapon you can carry. If there was ever proof that my place in the Hudson family was at the bottom of the ladder, it came during the celebrations that were supposed to make me feel included. Instead, they reminded me that I was invisible. Every birthday, every holiday, every family dinner turned into a stage where Derek and Isabel shined, while I stood in the shadows. Take my 30th birthday. I had hoped for something simple, a dinner, maybe a cake with my name on it. Instead, when I walked into my parents' house, I found a room full of balloons, champagne, and congratulations, but none of it had anything to do with me. They were toasting Derek for winning a minor case at his firm, a routine legal matter he inflated into a personal triumph. Dad handed him a brand new MacBook Pro, valued at $20,800, as though it were a trophy. Mom kissed him on the cheek, her eyes shining with pride. And me? I got a grocery store cheesecake shoved onto the corner of the table, already missing 2 slices. Someone stuck a single candle into it like an afterthought. 2 months later, the 4th of July rolled around, Civic Center Park was alive with fireworks, barbecues, and families draped in red, white, and blue. Our family gathered in Isabel's spacious backyard in the suburbs. She strutted out in a designer sundress just in time to open her gift, a sleek Tag Heuer watch worth $5,600. Dad clapped, Mom gasped with delight, and Isabel's husband fastened it onto her wrist like she was royalty. When it was my turn, I received a small plastic bag from the pile. Inside? A set of kitchen towels from Walmart still tagged $14.99. The family burst into laughter as though it were the punchline of a shared joke. I forced myself to smile, but the humiliation stung deeper than I let on. By Thanksgiving, the cruelty had shifted from subtle to public. 30 relatives crammed around the dining table, plates piled high with turkey and stuffing, wine glasses raised in noisy celebration. Derek stood, bourbon in hand, and smirked. "Here's to Clara," he announced. Still shelving books at the library, at least she's good at keeping quiet. The laughter that followed was sharp and merciless. One cousin added, "Better quiet than scrubbing toilets." My face burned as the sound of silverware clinked against plates, echoing in the silence that followed the joke. In that moment, I wanted to stand up and shout the truth, that I wasn't the helpless, invisible sister they believed me to be. I wanted to tell them I was paying property taxes on 21 different buildings, that tenants wired me thousands of dollars every month, that while they mocked my so-called boring life, I was quietly building a fortune, but I stayed silent. I let them laugh, let them sneer, let them think they knew who I was. 'Cause here's the truth. Every slight, every cruel joke, every careless dismissal was fuel. I was done being the forgotten one, the invisible one, the joke at the dinner table. And none of those humiliations, not the forgotten birthday, not the cheap towels, not the mocking toast, would compare to what was coming next. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day when nothing was supposed to change. I had just finished helping a teenager find research sources for her history paper when my phone buzzed in my bag. During work hours, I rarely checked messages, but something about the subject line caught my eye. "Sold your old warehouse, $250,000 secured." The email was from Derek. I read it once, then again, then a third time, my stomach tightening with every word. He didn't ask. He didn't even try to sound apologetic. His tone was smug, almost triumphant, as if I should thank him. "Family needed the money, handled it. You'll get your share later." My pulse raced. That old warehouse Derek so casually dismissed wasn't a relic collecting dust. It was a cornerstone of my portfolio, a 6-story brick commercial building on East 6th Street in downtown Denver, valued at over $9.3 million in the latest appraisal. The building housed tech startups, creative agencies, and a boutique coffee shop on the ground floor. The rental income alone averaged $121,000 a month, and now, according to Derek, it was gone. I closed my office door, sinking into the chair behind my desk. A million thoughts collided in my head. How did he even have access? What documents had he signed? Did he forge my name? My throat went dry. For a moment, I considered calling my parents, but I already knew what they'd say. They would excuse him, as they always did. He did it for the family business, Dad would argue. "Derek knows best," Mom would insist, "and Isabel..." She would smirk, delighted to see me robbed of the one thing they never believed I had. No, this wasn't a family discussion. This was fraud. I pulled out the worn leather folder I kept locked in my desk. Inside were the original purchase records, the deed in my name, tax receipts, the renovation permits, the signed leases from every tenant. Proof, cold, undeniable proof. My hands shook as I flipped through them. Derek hadn't just crossed a line, he had bulldozed through it. I dialed a number I had hoped I'd never need for something like this, Mr. Langford, my attorney. He answered on the second ring. "Clara, what's wrong?" "My brother," I said, forcing my voice steady. "He just claimed to have sold one of my properties." "The warehouse on East 6th. He said he already deposited the check." A beat of silence, then Langford's voice dropped. "That building's worth millions. If he sold it for a fraction, that's fraud, maybe even multiple felonies. I need copies of whatever you have. Deeds, leases, everything." "I have it all," I whispered. "Good. Don't contact him. Don't confront your parents. Let me start the process. We'll trace the transaction, contact the buyer, and stop the transfer if possible." "But Clara," his voice hardened, "be prepared. This won't just be legal. It's going to get ugly inside your family." I hung up, my hand trembling. Outside the library window, kids played tag on the lawn, their laughter floating in the late afternoon air. For them, the day was ordinary. For me, it was the start of a war. And for once, I wasn't going to stay quiet. Family gatherings in the Hudson household were always a performance, but Christmas Eve took the crown. My parents insisted on the tradition, everyone under one roof, candles glowing, carols playing faintly in the background while Mom served her famous roast beef. On the surface, it looked warm, almost cinematic, but beneath the tinsel and holiday cheer, the air was thick with favoritism. That night, I arrived on time, clutching a small box of cookies I'd baked myself. Derek's BMW was already in the driveway, polished so it gleamed under the porch lights. Isabel's husband had parked his Lexus neatly beside it, his tailored coat hanging over his arm as he walked in. My 10-year-old Civic looked out of place, wedged at the curb between two luxury SUVs. Inside, laughter echoed from the dining room. Derek was at the head of the table, a glass of red wine raised high. "To family," he declared, his voice booming, "and to smart decisions that keep us strong." My stomach tightened. I knew what was coming. Sure enough, Mom chimed in. "We're so proud of Derek. Can you imagine? He managed to sell that dusty old warehouse of Clara's. $250,000, what a miracle he found a buyer." The table erupted with cheers. Isabel leaned forward, her diamond earrings catching the light. Finally, Clara's property did something useful. I thought it was just sitting there, falling apart. Her tone was sweet, but the smirk curling her lips told the truth. I sat down quietly, sliding my cookies onto the buffet table. Nobody noticed. Derek grinned, soaking up the admiration. "It was nothing, really. Johnson Realty was looking for space in that area, and I knew Clara wasn't doing anything with it. I negotiated the deal myself. Got them up from 150 to 250, that's what family does. We look out for each other." "Smart move, son," Dad said proudly, clapping Derek on the back. "Always thinking ahead." My jaw clenched. Look out for each other? He had forged my name, stolen my property, and pocketed money that didn't belong to him. And still, they praised him as if he were the savior of the Hudson legacy. For a moment, I thought about blurting it out right there. Telling them the warehouse wasn't worth a mere $250,000, it was worth more than $9 million, generating over $121,000 every single month. I imagined the looks on their faces, the silence that would fall, but then I caught myself. No, timing mattered. If I exploded now, they'd laugh it off, accuse me of exaggerating, or worse, call me jealous. So I stayed still, smiling faintly, while inside my heart pounded. Derek raised his glass again. "To the future of the family business," he said, his tone dripping with self-satisfaction. Everyone clinked glasses, laughter spilling into the room. No one noticed the way my fingers curled tightly around the deed folded in my purse. No one saw the fire building behind my smile. They thought they had silenced me for good, that I would let this pass like every other insult, every other humiliation. But they had no idea what I was about to reveal. The room buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses, but my pulse was pounding too loudly to hear it. Derek basked in the spotlight, his voice swelling with self-congratulation, while Isabel whispered something smug into her husband's ear. My parents looked on proudly, as if their son had just saved the entire family from ruin. I let them finish their toasts. I let the moment stretch until the clamor of praise had reached its peak. And then, with deliberate calm, I reached into my purse. "Funny," I said softly, laying a folded document onto the table, "because I don't recall asking anyone to sell my property." The chatter died instantly. Derek's smile faltered. "What are you talking about?" Dad asked, his fork hovering midair. I slid the paper closer. "This is the original deed to the warehouse on East 6th Street. Purchased in my name, paid in full, not inherited, not borrowed, mine." Isabel chuckled nervously. "Clara, don't be dramatic. You mean the old building you managed for someone else, right?" "Everyone knows you don't actually own it." My eyes met hers, steady. "Managed? No. Owned since 2019. Cash sale, no mortgage." "Would you like to see the tax receipts, the lease agreements, the rent rolls?" I pulled out another stack of documents, the leather folder I had carried everywhere since Derek's email. I spread them across the table like playing cards in a high-stakes game. The silence was deafening. Derek shifted in his chair, color draining from his face. "That's impossible," he muttered. You don't have that kind of money." "I didn't need to marry it," I said evenly, glancing at Isabel. "And I didn't need Dad to hand it to me either. I built it, one property at a time, While you all laughed, I worked. Mom's hand trembled against her wine glass. Clara, sweetheart, are you saying... I'm saying, I interrupted, that the building Derek just sold without my consent is worth over $9 million. That it generates more than $121,000 every month. And that every tenant in it pays me, not Derek, not you, not anyone else, me. The weight of the words settled over the room like a storm cloud. Forks clinked against plates as relatives stared. Someone coughed. Isabel's husband looked away, suddenly fascinated with the floor. Derek's jaw tightened. You're bluffing! I leaned back in my chair, calm now. Check the public records. My name is on every deed, every tax bill, every contract. This is not a bluff, Derek. This is reality. And you just forged my signature on a fraudulent sale. Gasps rippled across the table. Dad sputtered, his face reddening. Now wait just a second! But it was too late. The illusion of Derek the golden boy had cracked, and everyone in that room could see the truth bleeding through. I folded my hands, my voice steady but cold. You wanted to make me the joke of this family. Tonight the joke's on you. The table sat frozen, a dozen pairs of eyes darting between Derek's paling face and the documents spread before them. And yet they still didn't know the full story, because what I had just revealed was only the beginning of the truth. The silence that followed my reveal was suffocating. Every eye darted between me and Derek, waiting for someone to speak. Finally, Derek pushed back his chair and stood, wine glass still in his hand. This is ridiculous, he scoffed, forcing a laugh. Clara doesn't own buildings. She doesn't even own her apartment. She's making this up to embarrass me. I didn't flinch. Then explain why your signature is on a fraudulent sale contract. Explain how you managed to sell a property that isn't yours. His voice hardened. I had power of attorney. Dad gave me authority years ago for family assets. That warehouse was just part of the portfolio. Dad cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably. That's true. I signed over limited authority to Derek. But Clara, sweetheart, maybe you misunderstood. No, I cut in sharply. That authority was for your properties, not mine. My name is on that deed, not yours. Not his, mine. Gasps rippled around the table. Isabel's husband leaned forward, whispering, Wait, if she's right, that's fraud. Derek's face flushed crimson. Don't twist this. I was protecting the family. Clara doesn't know how to handle a multi-million-dollar asset. I negotiated a good deal, and everyone benefits. Everyone? I asked coolly. Or just your failing law firm? Before he could reply, the doorbell rang. A hush fell over the dining room. Dad hurried to answer it, muttering something about neighbors dropping by. Moments later, he returned, pale, followed by Mr. Langford, my attorney. The room stiffened. Derek's glass slipped slightly in his hand. Sorry to interrupt your dinner, Langford said evenly, stepping into the glow of the dining room chandelier. He carried a folder thick with documents, but this couldn't wait. Derek sneered. Who invited you? I did, I said simply. Langford set the folder on the table and opened it with a deliberate flick. Here's the situation. Derek Hudson presented forged documents to Johnson Realty this week. He claimed authority he didn't have. He even submitted a falsified deed and a fabricated power of attorney. We have copies of all of it. The room exploded in whispers. Isabel gasped. Mom covered her mouth with her hands. Derek shook his head furiously. That's a lie. They wouldn't have accepted if it wasn't valid. They accepted, Langford agreed calmly, but only because the documents were convincing. Once we reached out, the title company realized they'd been duped. They're now cooperating fully, and the DA's office has already been notified. Dad stood abruptly. This is a family matter. We'll handle it ourselves. Langford's eyes narrowed. Fraud involving multi-million-dollar property isn't just a family matter. It's a felony, and your son is in serious legal jeopardy. Derek's composure cracked. His voice wavered. You can't do this, Clara. You wouldn't ruin me. I met his desperate stare. You already did that yourself. The table went silent again. Forks rested untouched. Even the Christmas carols playing softly in the background seemed mocking, out of place. For the first time, Derek looked small, vulnerable, and yet none of them realized this was only the beginning of his unraveling. The chandelier above the table flickered softly, casting long shadows over a room that had gone completely silent. Derek stood trembling, his glass forgotten, while Langford's folder of evidence sat wide open for everyone to see. No more excuses, no more stories. I took a breath and let my voice carry across the room. Here's how this works. Derek either pays me the full market value of the building, $9.3 million, or he faces prosecution for fraud, forgery, and theft. There is no middle ground. Gasps broke out around the table. Isabel's fork clattered onto her plate. Mom shook her head wildly, her eyes filling with tears. Clara, sweetheart, she pleaded, don't talk like that. He's your brother. You can't possibly mean to ruin his life over money. I looked at her, my expression steady. This isn't about money. This is about respect. He forged my name. He sold something that wasn't his, and you all sat here and cheered for him like he was a hero. Dad's face reddened. You don't air family laundry in front of outsiders, he snapped, glaring at Langford. We'll settle this quietly. Langford didn't flinch. With all due respect, Mr. Hudson, that option has already expired. Johnson Realty is demanding restitution, and the title company has reported the forgery. This isn't going away. Derek's voice cracked as he tried to recover. I was trying to save the family. My firm needed capital. You thought I was too small to fight back, I interrupted. You thought I'd sit here and let you take everything, the way I've swallowed every insult for years, but not this time. Tears slipped down Mom's face. Please, Clara, he's your little brother. Don't let him go to prison. I felt the weight of her words, but I didn't bend. He should have thought about prison before he forged my signature, before he lied, before he dragged my name into his failure. The room was a battlefield of emotions. Isabel folded her arms, looking shaken for once. This is insane, she muttered. Clara, you're overreacting. You've always been dramatic. I turned to her, my voice sharp. Dramatic? You laughed when I got kitchen towels while you unwrapped a $5,000 watch. You all laughed when Derek called me worthless, and now you expect me to keep playing the quiet one? No one spoke. Even the fire crackling in the hearth seemed to hush. I leaned forward, my eyes locking on Derek. You have 48 hours. Pay me $9.3 million, every cent, or I will let the DA's office do what it does best. His face drained of color. I don't have that kind of money. Then you shouldn't have stolen from me, I said coldly. The ultimatum hung in the air like a blade. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one shrinking in the shadows. Derek was. And he knew, just as everyone else did, that this was far from over. The days that followed were a blur of phone calls, legal filings, and icy silence from my family. Derek avoided me completely, though I knew he had no way to come up with the $9 million I demanded. Isabel stopped posting her usual glossy pictures on social media. My parents tried leaving voicemails, half guilt, half anger, insisting that families forgive and begging me to relent. I didn't. Instead, I made a decision that had been building inside me for years. I cut them off. No more Sunday dinners, no more being the butt of their jokes. No more standing in the corner while they paraded Derek and Isabel as the pride of the Hudson family. I was done. And for the first time, the silence felt liberating. With Langford handling the legal storm, I poured my attention into the life I had quietly built, and into shaping the future I wanted. I moved out of my one-bedroom apartment near Colfax Avenue and into a glass-walled penthouse overlooking the Rocky Mountains. Every morning, sunlight spilled across my living room, hitting the skyline of Denver, and reminding me that the view, the space, the freedom were mine alone. I upgraded my old Honda Civic, finally trading in the dented bumper and unreliable brakes for a sleek Tesla Model S Plaid. The first time I slid into the driver's seat, I laughed out loud, the sound echoing in the garage. Not because I needed a flashy car to prove anything, but because it was a reminder. I had earned this, without anyone's approval, without a penny of their help. But my rebirth wasn't just material. I wanted my success to mean something beyond me. So, I established the Hudson Education Fund, a scholarship program for students pursuing library sciences, education, and community service. For every cruel joke about my quiet librarian job, I decided to turn that insult into a legacy. The fund's first recipients were announced at a press event downtown, and seeing their tears of joy reminded me why I had fought so hard. Socially, too, my life transformed. I stopped chasing my family's approval and started surrounding myself with people who valued me, colleagues who admired my discipline, friends who didn't care what car I drove or how many properties I owned. For once, my relationships weren't defined by comparison or competition. They were built on mutual respect. And yet, late at night, when I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of my penthouse, watching the city lights flicker across the skyline, I couldn't help but think about everything it had taken to get here. The laughter, the dismissals, the betrayals, they had all been bricks in the wall I had to climb, and I climbed it, alone. I wasn't the forgotten middle child anymore. I wasn't just a librarian, I was Clara Hudson, the woman who turned invisibility into power, who turned mockery into millions. And this was only the beginning of the life I had built on my own terms. Justice has a way of arriving quietly, then hitting like thunder. For my family, it didn't take long. Derek was the first to fall. Within weeks, the district attorney's office filed charges: fraud, forgery, and grand theft. His law license was suspended and his firm collapsed overnight. Clients fled, creditors lined up, and soon his shiny office with its mahogany desks and glass conference room was padlocked by the landlord. He went from the promising attorney to the disgraced fraud in less than a month. The humiliation spread fast. Local newspapers ran headlines about the scandal. Hashtags like #DenverFraud trended on Twitter, dragging Derek's name through the mud. Former classmates, colleagues, even his closest friends vanished. No one wanted to be associated with a criminal lawyer. Isabel didn't escape either. Her husband, once proud to flaunt their wealth at country clubs, suddenly found his business partners questioning his judgment. No one wanted to invest in a man whose brother-in-law had become the city's most infamous con artist. Their invitations dried up. Isabel, who once bragged about her designer handbags and ski vacations in Aspen, found herself isolated. She stopped posting pictures online, too ashamed to face the whispers. As for my parents, the cost was heavier than they ever imagined. Their perfect image of the Hudson family shattered. Neighbors who once waved politely now avoided them at the grocery store. The people they'd tried so hard to impress turned their backs. And for the first time, my parents had to live with the bitter taste of shame, not because of me, the daughter they'd dismissed, but because of the son they'd worshipped. I didn't celebrate their downfall, but I didn't mourn it either. It was simply the balance of actions meeting consequences. For years, I had been the invisible one, the joke at the table. Now I was the one who walked freely while they were left carrying the weight of their choices. Justice had been served. When I look back on everything, it's strange to think how much I once longed for my family's approval. I spent years shrinking myself, trying to earn their respect with quiet diligence, only to realize that nothing I did would ever be enough for them. To my parents, success was measured by flashy titles and expensive gifts. To Derek, it was about cutting corners and stealing credit. To Isabel, it was about appearances. But for me, success became something different. It was about self-respect. About building a life that couldn't be taken away by laughter at a dinner table or by a forged signature on a piece of paper. I used to believe family was everything, that blood meant loyalty, love, and trust. But the truth is harsher. Family doesn't always mean love. Sometimes it means entitlement, favoritism, and betrayal. And if you allow it, those closest to you will drain you dry, leaving you invisible in the very home where you should feel seen. The difference is choice. I chose not to stay quiet anymore. I chose to stand up for myself, to demand respect, to let justice take its course. And once I did, I found a freedom I never imagined possible. So now, I'll ask you the same question I asked myself in that dining room. If your own brother stole from you, if your parents cheered him on, would you forgive him for the sake of family? Or would you let him face the consequences of his choices? Because that's the crossroads I stood at, and I know the path I took. If you connected with my story, if you felt the sting of betrayal or the rush of justice, I invite you to join me. Hit the like button, subscribe to Heartless Revenge, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next true revenge story. And please, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me, what would you have done in my shoes? Your voice matters, and sometimes it might even inspire the next story we tell.